Hello, everyone. So Monday Garrison is back today. We had a slight delay due to technical issues, but we are slightly on time anyway. So we're going to start today about Latin American startup ecosystem. Every year, I enjoy interviewing key players around the global startup ecosystem, not only Latin America, but also the Northern America, Africa, here and there. But what always amazes me is the transformation that changes year by year in the Latin American ecosystem. And today also we have a special guest who can truly represent Latin American ecosystem and give us some insights. So first we're going to go through the slides as usual. Oops, sorry. Yes, Mercado Libre is one of the most representing Latin American tech startup that started in 1999. And then who has become the first Latin American tech company to be listed on NASDAQ. They have multiple different set of business, from payments, credit business, e-commerce business, but majorly e-commerce business. It covers 18 different countries that has expanded globally. It was founded in Argentina, but apparently currently they have relocated to the capital city of Uruguay, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But other than Mercado Libre, what do we really know about Latin American ecosystem? Because it's a country of a wonder for many Korean founders, and I think also for many different founders, because yes, we do have a lot of Latin American colleagues in our ecosystems once in a while, but when we get to see, like, what do we know? Like, what are the keywords that comes up into our minds? We can say, like, South Summit, MWC maybe, Mercado Libre, Startup Chile, and then what, right? So we just want to dig in a bit deeper and get to know more about this ecosystem. So if we look at the Latin American ecosystem's overview, which is pretty interesting, the conversion rate of VC-backed startups in Latin America from seed to Series A is 10.1%, and to Series B is 31.6%. And to Series C is 36.1%, to Series D is 30%. If you compare this to South Korean statistics, it has a pretty good number of Series A to B, and especially C to D is very unique, because in South Korea, most of the series rounds are done around like Series B or C. So the percentage is like, I would say, late 20%, and in Latin America, apparently, the growth rate is pretty high. So that's one interesting thing about Latin American ecosystem. Another thing is the number of VC-backed startups in Latin America by country. It's accumulated statistics. So in 2019, it started with 1,019 startups by total that has been backed by VCs, which Brazil was taking 507 startups out of 1,000, which is over 50%. No, nearly 50%. Mexico, 203. And then Chile took 96 startup portions, and then Argentina, and then Colombia, and the others. And now when we come all the way up to 2024, it's 1,428 startup has been VC-backed from the Brazilian ecosystem, 532 from Mexico, 274 from Chile, 269 from Argentina, 255 from Colombia. If we also compare this number to South Korea, which is interesting, is that in South Korea is roughly about 7,000 startup that has been invested by accelerators in the accumulated numbers since 2017 till 2025. So it's about half of South Korea, but if you see the growth of these numbers, it's nearly doubled by each ecosystem, and also by total, it nearly went all the way up to triple. So the growth is there, and we have to keep an eye on this ecosystem, since everyone wants much more growing ecosystem rather than the mature ecosystem. So we have to see the market. So Latin America is a market. In total, we have 666 million population, 129 million coming from Mexico, 218 coming from Brazil, 52 million coming from Colombia, 46 from Argentina, 20 million from Chile. 660 million population, when you compare it to the global standard, is in the top 10 economical size and the global rankings. And as an economy as well, the if you look at the income share by percentile, this was also super interesting because 19% of the income in Brazil has been owned by the top 1%, and 26% owned by top 1% in Mexico. 13% of the entire income has been owned by top 1% in Argentina, 70% in Colombia, 22% in Chile. So it is pretty clear to see that they do have a gap in the wealth. And at the same time, if we apply those numbers into a population, they do have a pretty good amount of population that has a very strong purchasing powers. And if we see a lot of Latin American founders in South Korea or Korean founders who are considering Latin America as a market, often they talk about beauty products or cosmetic products. And I believe in that perspective, it do have a pretty good chance considering the number of population that has a strong purchasing power, but yet still these gap of wealth seems to be the homework that's given to the Latin American ecosystem to have a larger consumer market. And what are the obstacles? Tax. This was something that I was very much surprised. Argentina, 35% headline corporate tax rate. Colombia, same. Brazil, 34%. Mexico, 30%. Which is very high number to figure out. Doing business tax index is nearly at the end of the entire country ranking. Brazil is staying at 184th out of 190 countries. Mexico is placed in 120th out of 190 countries. Argentina 170th in the 190 countries, and Colombia 148th in the out of 190 countries. The reason that I brought up tax is because tax plays a very important role when it comes to a disposable income, reinvestment rates, retained earnings, etc., etc. And I think tax would become a pretty strong obstacles on fostering the startup ecosystem and in the long term to secure mature startups in their regional ecosystem instead of losing them to the US markets or Middle Eastern markets or any other tax haven ecosystems that can be considered. So are these obstacles limiting all the activities or limiting all the growth? I would say no. Still, we have 26 unicorns in Latin America in 2024. If you go through these list of startups, those are considered unicorn in Latin America. You'll be pretty much surprised about their unique business models, unique products, how tax savvy they are, and also. Startup Chile, it has been a renowned program, representing program in Latin American ecosystem for attracting foreign entrepreneurs and also fostering the local startup ecosystem. So you really might want to dive in deeply. And also, we were quite afraid about Argentina's economical situation in early this year, but apparently the recovery signs are coming in pretty strong. And also, this has influenced a lot of different startup ecosystem in Latin America. So major Argentinian startups started to relocate in Chile, Uruguay. As mentioned from the first page of today's slide, Mercado Libre, they also relocated themselves to Uruguay after these kind of crises. So, I think Latin American ecosystem is definitely a place you might want to have a look on. And I would love to introduce much further detail with our expert, Maria Noel de la Paz.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a quick run. I really wanted to keep all the juice for the talk.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, please introduce yourself. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be a part of this podcast. And also, thank you very much for bringing Latin American market into, on the page, so that everyone can know a little bit more about it. Okay, my name is Maria Noel de la Paz. I am originally from Uruguay, but I've been living in Chile for 10 years. I've been working in the startup ecosystem for 10 years as well. I started working at Startup Chile, as you mentioned, the first government program that actually invited startups from everywhere in the world to have their business in Chile and learn more about the ecosystem and in Latin America as a starting point of expanding into the market. Later I work at SeedStars, that's a Swiss company that invests and tries to impact people's lives in emerging markets. I was part of the Latin American team. And currently, I am the acceleration director of Magical. Magical is a VC fund that is currently investing in startups that are solving the critical issues of the Latin American region. So I've been in the Latin American ecosystem for a while now, and it's very interesting, everything that you mentioned, and I can't wait to speak more about what questions do you have about that region.
Okay, so starting off from your job as a working on the acceleration sector of Magical VC, you must review a lot of deals, a lot of startups, and you will see a lot of personal statistics that you have accumulated over time. And one of the question is like, what are the types of problems that Latin American startups often try to solve? Because like in South Korea, a lot of problems are often quite typical, or these problems are highly deep tech type of products, so that like any normal people, mediocres, will never understand what they're talking about, but it's actually very meaningful.
Yeah.
But what's going on in the Latin American ecosystem or Chile ecosystem?
Yeah, I think because I've been studying and investigating the ecosystem here in Korea and Japan since 2023. And I've seen there are a lot of differences and a lot of similarities as well. But talking about the differences, I think that what you mentioned is one of them. Like in the startup world in Latin America, usually founders start with the problem, and the problems that as you mentioned also in your slides, that you can see that there is a lot of inequality. So that comes to, as a result, there's a lot of problems in terms of financial inclusion, in terms of education, in terms of security, in terms, we have a lot of problems in Latin America. So the founders that I actually see every day and that they are actually creating businesses, they're actually trying to target the problems that they have in their own communities. Usually in Latin America I think the top one industry is fintech. I think because of the financial inclusion and the problems that we have related to that. That is number one. But I see every day like the founders, what they are trying to solve. They're not trendy catchers, they're not the buzzwords, as now as AI, or before it was, I don't know, blockchain, the metaverse, etc. And other ecosystems, I can see that they lean more into kind of like those kind of things. Like I think in the region, Latin America, at least in the fund that I work for, we look for startups and founders that are actually very serious about solving the critical issues of the region. And as you also showed, like the region is really, really big. And we have a lot of differences also throughout the region, but the similarities that we have is that we usually have the same problems, maybe at different levels, but most countries have the same problems. So usually if you have a solution that you start in Chile, for example, you will probably going to be able to expand it to the other countries in the region. So there's also a very good opportunity of expansion from the get-go. So those are kind of like the startups and the type of startups that I see more and more is in Latin America, usually trying to solve critical issues that they have or their families or their communities are having, and they are creating something with technology to make it to solve it faster and also to make money. Not an NGO,
Okay.
but it
Yeah.
starts with like an actual true problem that they understand because they have. So I think that's a big difference between starting with a solution or, yeah.
Then, as you mentioned, like Latin America is a huge ecosystem, 666 million
Yeah.
people living,
Yeah.
mostly have a similar problem. And as we also reviewed on the tech, we have like pretty good amount of VC-backed startup over there. What's the typical rankings that people would have in mind when it comes to the Latin American startup ecosystem as an overall, right? Like, is it like Brazil typically number one, or?
Yes, Brazil is number one for sure. Then it really depends on what you are looking into, like Brazil is usually number one in like most of the categories that you're trying to rank. If you are looking into opportunities or like VC funds, etc., like Brazil is probably number one. No, it's probably not. It is number one. Number two is Mexico. Also because of the market size and there's that's every startup in Spanish-speaking Latin America wants to get to Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like it's a big market, it's the same language, and usually it's kind of like the mecca for a lot of founders.
And very English friendly, right?
They're English friendly, and usually that's the starting point to get to the US later.
Okay.
So like you start expanding, and then you get to Mexico, and then you go to the US. That's the usual route for a Latin American founder. Brazil is like kind of like detour, like no one in Spanish-speaking Latin America really targets Brazil because it's a very tough market to tackle because of many reasons. The language would be one.
Yeah,
like,
Portuguese.
Portuguese, which is similar to Spanish, but still it's different.
It's a different set of language.
Also, the way they do business, it's pretty different from the way that we do business in Spanish-speaking Latin America. Sometimes it's a little bit harder. Also Brazilians have a more like in-house kind of mindset. So their borders are kind of like, Brazil was used to be called the cemetery of startups because like most startups that wanted to get into the Brazilian ecosystem, like they would fail, and sometimes they would invest so much to get to that market that they would die trying.
From the Spanish-speaking Latin America.
From the Spanish-speaking Latin America, But so it's not impossible. Like even Mercado Libre did it, and they had a really tough ride because in Brazil at that time in 1999, there were already like competitors that were Brazilians, so they actually had a really tough time to hack that ecosystem, but they did. And so like there are ways they had their own strategy. It's not cut and paste like as in every ecosystem, but like they had their own strategy and they conquered it. But usually, maybe because some of the experiences beforehand of other startups have been tough, so like founders just try to go on another route, and Mexico looks like an easier kind of path. Even, I don't know what easier is in the startup world, but and so those are kind of, and then there's recently. Well, Chile was high up in the rankings in terms of the development and the growth of the ecosystem. It's the one that kind of started it all, and I think the government of Chile had the upper hand in how they managed the whole development of their ecosystem. Startup Chile was the first government program in the world in 2012. So, at that time, now we hear about Startup Challenge. We hear about every country, every government is looking into that. But imagine in 2012 when a guy came to the Ministry of of Economy and say like, hey, why don't we bring like foreigners from everywhere in the world into Chile? Let's give them money, a visa, and a space for them to work. And the only thing they would ask in return, it was like social equity. Like these guys, what they had to do was to go to schools, to universities, and to speak of what they were doing. So that started to make the entrepreneur virus It's not a marketing word right now to talk about virus, but that is actually how it happened. You know, like it started like because
spreading the word.
Spreading the word, because Chileans didn't do entrepreneurship or tech or anything at that time. They were very conservative. So this started moving the wheel. And years later, after a long time, well, Startup Chile now is a world-known program, and it's been cut and paste in different governments, and the methodology is still used everywhere. So Chile has always had, you know, the upper hand in being very progressive about the different laws and the different things that they're doing with their ecosystem. And I think, me being a foreigner in Chile, I admire a lot of what they're doing, and what all the achievements that they had so far. And recently, Colombia has been giving like a really good battle. I remember at SeedStars, I traveled to Colombia in 2017, and they were really starting, and they were really green at that time, and cut like 8 years later, 7 years later, they're now on really fighting with Chile about like the rankings and even what the best place to have your you know, to be an entrepreneur is and stuff like that. So it's actually it's great. Then in other rankings, of course, there's also Argentina because of the size of the country and the population. But those are kind of like the top 5, I think, in terms of rankings of Latin America, of the ecosystems that are the most popular, maybe, or well known, or to look after, you know.
I mean, did that kind of naturally influence the increase in number of VCs as well?
I think so, yeah. Okay. I think so. I think as the ecosystem became more and more mature, like more and more people started to see investing as, you know, a possible path. The ecosystem in general, Latin America, it's more conservative in general. Like the people that have money, they usually have been investing, you know, in like
real estate.
In real estate, exactly, or like, you know,
public
family
shares,
offices that have, you know, money into like really safe kind of places. Afterwards, in 2020, actually, when there started to be the boom of tech in Latin America, we had like all the unicorns. 2021 was insane. It was the moment, like what a moment to be alive in Latin America. It was like, wow, money everywhere, and like unicorns and IPOs, and it was just like, whoa. So there were a lot of actually family offices and like people, actually also founders, like ex-founders that were, you know, this is an actual possibility of keep investing and keep moving the wheel. So yeah, that really hyped up, and there was a lot of investors and a lot of LPs that were actually doing their first investments. And that was a really high time of VC. Right now, it's not the same story, unfortunately.
It's a global phenomenon.
Yeah, it's a global phenomenon. Yeah. We've been in the winter of VC. I don't know if you do you call that here as well?
Oh yeah,
the winter always.
Of VC. We've been talking about that phrase for about last 3 years.
Oh,
we've been
really?
on a winter for last 3 years.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we've been also in winter like for a long time. I go to a lot of events about VCs. There's organizations, VC organizations in like most every country, and there's also LAVCA, that is the Latin American VC Association that has all the VCs from like organizations for every country, and they have like an annual meeting, and they do a lot of reports, and you know there's a lot of talks, and that is something actually very different, I think, from other regions as well. Like in Latin America, we collaborate a lot. And that is something that when I was here, I had to do more research, of course, but even in Europe, I've also been doing research in Europe. I've been doing research here in Asia, and I don't see that much collaboration as we have in Latin America, maybe because we have less resources, maybe because the way that we are, you know, that we are, I don't know, we build trust and we exchange information and we're closer in terms of like when we do business and stuff. Or we also have the mentality that we have to get together, otherwise, you know, as a pack, because individually we're not, you know, we will get there, but it will take a lot of time.
But how do you guys, what's the form of collaboration typically, especially on the world of VCs or seed-stage investors?
Yeah, I mean, there's collaboration in that kind of like speaking about this kind of issues. Like, hey, we are in the winter of VC. We get together. Okay, like what are we feeling? How are we doing? Like exchanging like experiences of each of us, like in their own VCs. But also there's a lot of deal flow exchange. Like I talk most every month with VCs that they're around like the same ticket that we invest, and we exchange like, hey, have you been investing? Oh yeah, or like, you know, like we are very open about like, and that is
No
something,
secrets.
no secrets. And like if you invest and I invest and we're both like, you know, like partners in this, like it's going to be best for the startup, and it's going to be best for us, and it's going to be best for the whole ecosystem.
True. I mean, that's one of the interesting things that I found out from the LAVCA report, was that there's this slide that is describing the deal flow overlap between VCs. So like 500 Global invested on this deal. They have like 3% overlapping deals.
Yeah.
Or 21% overlapping deal with here and there. Like
Yeah.
they do kind of collaborate,
Yes,
I guess.
yes. And more you start knowing more the VCs, and you start knowing more also how they work and what they add on to the startups as well, and their network and stuff. So, and you see the ones that have kind of like the same vision as you have, or the same ways that you invest, or, you know, the same approach to investing. So you start collaborating even more and exchanging even more. So in the end, like, it's really even a partnership between like the VCs of like, you know, of helping out each other and exchanging information. So I think it's really good.
Okay, then in South Korea we have a pretty clear distinguishment between accelerator and VC. And does that also apply in Latin American ecosystem? If so, how do you guys distinguish or define or determine the difference between VC and accelerators?
Well, we have, the thing is Magical, the VC fund that I work for, it's kind of like hybrid because it has both.
Yeah, the both arms.
Yeah, we have both. So we used to be an accelerator. So until 2020, we used to be an accelerator, and then we started like leaning into the VC. I think also because everything that was happening in the region, so we started leaning into, oh, okay, should we raise our first like fund, like private fund? Because the first fund that we had was actually the government of Chile. They had a program that they would give $2.7 million to different accelerators so that they could learn how to accelerate and invest, and and they would support, of course, like we had a lot of limitations.
2.7 million for each?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that was our first fund, like Magical One.
Okay.
Yeah, so we invested in 35 startups, and that was very, very good. I think what the government in Chile does, it's great because it's like you are in the bike, you know, when you're learning to ride your bike, and they put the two wheels.
Let them fail.
Yeah, you know, like, okay, we have the two wheels. Okay, like, you know, the objective and the purpose is not like, oh, give me the KPIs or give me, you know, like
no mandates.
It's like it's okay, you know, like just like you accelerator, learn how to invest, learn the methodology you're going to use with your founders, and just like do your best in trying to scout for the best startups. Learn how to
make a track record.
Make a track
for the
record.
Second fund.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then for the founders as well, like, because we invested in them, and of course we look that they have results. We look that they are very serious about their business. We help them with all the resources, because in the end, it's like, this is money from the government. It's money from the people. They're using this money not to build schools or to build a hospital, but to do this. So we are very serious about, like, you know, public funds. And so, like, we pushed a lot of our founders, but then at the end of the day, there was not really a KPI of results, specific results that they needed to show in order of, or if you don't reach this, you'd have to give the money back, you know, no. So I think that period, that was from 2017 until 2021, that was a really, really good time for us to learn about all those things. And then we felt mature enough to start our own private fund. So yeah, and because it was 2021, so there were a lot of LPs that were actually like really interested, and we showed like, hey, look at our track record. Like from, we multiplied the valuation of our first fund 10 times. So like, yeah. So are you
literally
interested?
2.7 million.
Yeah, literally.
To 27 million.
Yeah. So we showed that, of course, not every startup, like that's the overall. Yeah. So like that brought a lot of interest in, okay, like I would like to know how to invest. So now they're private LPs that before they had like more conventional kind of businesses, and now they're like, okay, I'll just put some money into this, to these guys that they already know and have the track record. So that happened, which is better in a way. It has its good things and its bad things. Of course, the good thing is like now we can invest in anything. Okay. Before we had limitations. It only had to be a Chilean startup, and we had to show a lot of like bureaucracy and different things to the government, of course, because it's public money. Exactly. And now we are free. However, of course, we don't have the wheels anymore, and now there's results to be showed, and now there's people that are actually looking for the KPIs and this and that. So it's a really interesting challenge right now. But that is how everything started evolving in the ecosystem. And I think going back to your question, the main difference between the VC, I think, is VCs usually just, it's not just like they invest money, and it depends on how involved they get. Usually they get pretty involved in terms of like, having maybe they have a place in their board, or they have like meetings, or they connect them with your ecosystem or like with their networks and stuff like that. The difference with an accelerator in terms of like what we do, that's why we have both things, and I think it's a great match. Because we actually have a business, we work on the business for them. So like when we invest, so like if it was an investment fund, that's it. Okay, we would meet and then we know, how you're doing, etc. Okay. But what we do is once we invest, we do like an X-ray of the startup. So like in a lot of dimensions, like from, like from the sales or like even fintech, their financials, their the everything, the tech, the even like leadership, or how are they dealing with how many people they work with, how's their human resources. So like we do like a culture thing, and then we create a plan, and with that plan we meet with them and we work with specific goals, like a business consulting thing for 6 months. And we can help them a lot to know them much better, because I work with founders that I meet like twice a month, and we work together, and I see the pains and the gains and everything, but it's a much closer relationship, so we know how to help them and when to push them and when to leave them and stuff like that. So I think it's a more hands-on. The accelerators are much more hands-on, and the VCs are more hands-off. However, they, of course, have higher resources. And I think not all accelerators and not all VCs are for every startup or every founder. I think each founder has to research and know exactly what they need, so they know what to look for. If it's an accelerator, great. If it's a VC, great. If it's both, magical.
What's the average check size for the pre-seed or seed stage, maybe even till Series A?
Yeah, well, in comparison to other regions, I remember I go to events, like global events, and I ask like, oh, what's your ticket? And it's like, no, we invest in pre-seed. And what's the ticket size? And they were like, oh yeah, $700,000, $1 million. I'm like, oh my God.
That's not a seed, right?
Yeah. So for us, like pre-seed would be from 50K to 2,050K. That would be pre-seed. Seed would be from 250 maybe to 1 million, and then like Series A would be from 1 million onwards. And then Series B, Series C, etc. But our tickets are much smaller than if you go to the US, for example, and
True,
sometimes you have a PowerPoint and they go, oh, okay, like 1 million. Okay. I'm like, I go crazy when I see that. I'm like, I wish I could have that too.
Then when we talk about funds and like hearing these kind of interesting schemes that Startup Chile had on establishing funds for the accelerators, since you guys made like pretty cool multiples out of it, my next question will be like, what are the typical exit plans for the VCs and accelerators in Latin America overall? Because last time I had a pretty good chat with one of a Brazilian VC friend, and what he told me is that typically it's U.S. stock market, right? Like that's the best aim, and the regional stock markets are kind of hopeless. That's what most of the Latin American founders said. So what are the typical plans?
Yes, well, it has changed, I guess, because the market changes, so it has changed. But yeah, before 2021, I think the IPO was, the road to go, like for most, So we had like, I would, on LinkedIn, I would see like startup founders like ringing the bell like every day. I was like, wow, like, there were a lot of startups that IPO'd on that period. But then I think after 2021, like that went, that's not happening anymore. I think nowadays what's the road has been more the M&As. That has been like last year, there's still not a lot of M&As, but that has been like the most popular way of increasing numbers. There's also now there are some secondaries that are starting to appear in the ecosystem. I think also because that was the question, like, we have all these startups, we have the funds, we have everything, so but we need to keep moving. We cannot be, even for us as a VC, like we don't want to be the VC there forever. Like we have a period of time. Exactly. So, and of course, like we can add on to the startup for some time. Like afterwards, it's like probably a bigger fund is going to help you better, and we can get out, and they can continue. So for us, it has been more. Last year we had 3 exits, and one of them was an M&A. It was a Brazilian company actually that bought a Chilean company.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Then we had also another fund that bought our shares. And the other one was also so I think those are the paths that we are going right now. But we have a long way to go, to be honest. We have a really long way to go.
No, I mean, like, I think you guys are actually doing a way better job than South Korea does, because only 2.4% of the entire exit belongs to the M&A in South Korea. So, like, I can't say, like, M&A is always better than IPO, but what I want to say is that we just don't have a lot of exit options, and the sense of entrepreneurial ownership versus returning it back to the shareholders are always having a conflict. And many Korean companies, when they go to reach the that critical mass of their business, they're like, I'm good to go. Why should we sell the company, right? So that's one of the concepts that I believe like Latin America is doing a pretty good job on it. Then on that extent, many people in the global ecosystem, they often don't really prefer M&A because the valuations are not really there. Is it also kind of similar in Latin America?
It really depends case to case, but it hasn't been an issue. I think it's all about negotiation, and it hasn't been an issue. I think usually, and also most of the time for M&As also, like you can start negotiating, and then if it's not the right amount of money, like you just say no and continue with your business. I think startups have the upper hand in that sense, because if they're negotiating with a big company, but then the terms are not the ones that they are interested in, or that they are there would be just like, hey, no, I'll just continue doing my own thing. So yeah, I haven't been conflicts of valuation. And the ones that I've seen are startups that some company comes, because it also changed a lot. Before, companies had a lot of upper hand because, I'm the company, I'm the big person here, the big boss in the room. And that has happened for a long time. But now, like, actually that is not, that is shifting a lot lately. So startups are having more and more, space and more talk, like eye to eye with the companies. So, and startup founders are more and more mature as well. That is something that's very interesting also in the ecosystem. Like now the big companies are, second, third time founders that they already had, they already went through a lot. So now they're much more mature. And once they get into that conversation with a big company, they don't feel smaller. They're like, they're confident about what their product is, the valuation the product has, and they're more humble, I think, in that terms. And I think that the winter of VC has been good in that sense, because a lot of founders have gotten down off the pony. I don't know if that's also something you say in Korean. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know the saying here, but like we say that when someone gets down the pony is like, because before valuations were ridiculous. Like sometimes
it was rich.
It was sometimes even for us. Like we would have startups that would apply for our fund, and they were like, they had nothing. Our valuation is $10 million, and like, why? But because that startup is also 10 million, and we do kind of the same. Right? And it's like, it doesn't work that way. So I think we were, all of us, like the whole ecosystem, we were more immature. We were like, getting all this excitement and hype about things, but then now the winter has come, so now we have to be very careful, and now we have to learn, now we have to be very strategic, and now we have to see the numbers as what they are. So and that made a lot of founders fail, a lot of VCs fail, a lot of companies also fail, and learn about that. And now the conversation has changed. So now I think we're more mature. Founders are more mature, VCs are more mature, and companies are also realizing that their innovation office or the offices, they're not the marketing department, because before that happened a lot. Like now they're really looking for an M&A. Now they're really looking to see how they collaborate with a startup that will solve the issues that they're having in their own company, because companies are having a lot of issues too with everything that's happening with the economy as well. So we all need each other.
I mean, I think that brought up a pretty fair point. And talking about the fund, especially in the Latin America, considering the geographical location and also the closeness that Latin America has tagged along with like U.S. ecosystem, like it or not, and even Mercado Libre, it was founded by the Stanford graduate, right? So like you guys are kind of attached, right? And even majority of funds many of them are flowing from the U.S. capital market as well. So I can't just miss out this factor of SPV, because many startups, if they want to be funded from the U.S. capitals, even if they are in Latin America, they would have to set up a special purpose vehicles, maybe in Cayman, maybe in Delaware. Is that a typical thing, or most of the founders would prefer to just found their company in their regional ecosystem, like Chile, Brazil? And then if the fund wants to invest from U.S. to the region, then they have to figure out from there.
Well, until recently, most of the startups, they would have their company incorporated in Delaware.
Even from Latin America?
Okay. From Latin America. Actually, it was not a requirement, but it was a suggestion, even from the VCs ourselves. If the company was already incorporated in Delaware, it was like, because of many reasons. One of them is like, they have the vision. you know,
and variety
like
of options.
Yeah, exactly. And they have the vision that they're not going to stay in the region. So they're already, you know, like they're already seeing where this is going after. Nowadays, it's been with everything that's happening in the U.S., you know, being a little bit like fluctuating. We have to see now what the suggestion would be. Like some companies are actually not doing that anymore, or they're closing their Delaware subsidiaries. So now it's kind of like a strange moment that we're trying to figure out. But most of the companies, they were incorporated in Delaware. We had a lot of services of lawyers and different people and professionals that would help them to do that, and it's a very common practice. So
these days, the common practice itself is just slightly going through a transition phase, and you know, looking for a new location for SPV or a tax haven to set up a holdings company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most of them, in any case, they're always funded in their original market, and then you know, like, but most of them have several subsidiaries in different countries, but most are their home country, and usually it was Delaware. Right now, I think everyone is like a little bit like slowed down a little bit just to see, okay, let's see how this evolves and where the pieces fall and what the best thing it is for us.
Then continuous question would be like, what kind of startups would you recommend to expand or start from Latin American ecosystem?
I think, what type of startups would be startups that are solving the critical issues of the region. So that's why I think fintech startups are one of the leading ones. Yeah. And also I've seen a big growth of startups that are in climate tech.
Okay.
Because of course, Latin American region is the lungs of the world, and also you know, like a lot of food and production and land, and so like there's a lot of climate tech, agri tech. There's also mining companies, because there are really big mining regions in Chile, in Peru, also in Brazil. So there's also companies related to that. And education too. Like I'm thinking about like different problems that we have. Education also, startups are really growing right now, and health too, because access to health, etc. When you have a region that has a lot of problems, then you have a region that has a lot of potential for startups creating solutions of actual problems, you know? And you have a market already there. There's a market there. That's why I always, when I talk with founders here in Korea, or, you know, like, it's like, if you have a solution, of course, like, you're going to have a market there. If you're tackling, you know, a problem in agriculture, or in, you know, I don't know, even fishing, or, you know, you have a market there already, and people that are needing that solution. So, I think it's such an interesting market. And sometimes people think, because the headlines, I recently saw a report on this, the headlines about Latin America globally are usually so pessimistic. So people outside of Latin America, they have this vision of Latin America being this like scary place of, I don't know what happens there.
Netflix done a pretty important job in there,
Yeah, I mean, I remember I asked a lot of people, like, "Oh, you're interested in Latin America? Would you come to Latin America?" They're like, "Oh no, it seems so you know, so scary, so unsafe." And I'm like, I felt more unsafe in walking in, I don't know, in Paris than walking around my neighborhood, to be honest. And it's just the media highlighting whatever they want to highlight. But, you know, we haven't done a good job also in spreading, you know, our side, our side of the story. You know, I think we have a lot to learn about Korea, because Korea nowadays, with the Hallyu wave and stuff, like, everyone is like Korea fanatic. And of course, you know better the culture and the society. There's of course a lot of like really good bright sides of Korea.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also like some other sides that they're not the most happy ones. And the same happens with Latin America. Like
True.
we have, but ours are the not that good ones are the ones that are more exposed. And the good ones, like we have like really warm people, resilient people, creative people that I don't think anyone that has gone to Latin America said like, oh, what a boring time I had. Like you will always have a good time, good conversation, warm people, and people trying to do their best for their communities, very community centered. It's a great region. I invite everyone to come. And to invest as well.
That's the perspective I wanted to brought up. So for me, what I see is that South Korean accelerated dash VC market is kind of overflowing right now, and we're going to see a lot of spillovers. What I meant by is that many Korean accelerators and VCs or investment funds will have to start looking to move beyond Korean borderline, right? And for what kind of accelerators would you recommend the Latin American ecosystem or Chile ecosystem as their next point of expansion as an accelerator or investors?
Yeah, I think I would recommend I know that we have to go step by step, I know right now there's like no knowledge maybe or no connection between both regions, and that is something that I am.
We're very distant,
and when I first came here 2 years ago, I was like trying to understand why we are so disconnected. Is it because the language, is it because of the distance, is it because of the culture, is it because of, what is this? So I spoke to a lot of people, and that's how I met you, and I learned a lot about the ecosystem through your eyes and your knowledge. And I realized it's none of those things. It's just like we don't have ourselves in the map. Like we don't know what's happening.
We just never had an opportunity,
right?
Exactly.
We don't know because we never met,
Yeah.
So I think for a starting point of an accelerator, I think maybe I would start accelerators that maybe have like a specific vertical. That would be a good connection with Latin America. For example, I don't know if they are in the agri-tech vertical, climate tech, or like
mining.
Mining. So like these kind of verticals that are, basic in there's a lot of business in Latin America, so that they can start talking and seeing how they could collaborate and exchange. I think that would be the starting point. And it's also for VCs, like maybe connect with other VCs that are investing or that they are, learning more about the specific verticals that they are interested in, and start to collaborate. And I think there's so much potential. I know I say this all the time, but there's a lot of potential, because other thing that I realized is that the way we do business in Korea and Latin America in general, it's pretty similar. Like we are very like bond oriented, trust oriented. Like we care about who the other person is. Like we take the time. Maybe we talk about like family, the weather, or whatever before. Like, okay, let's talk about business. We have like that kind of closeness that we need to create before, as difference to maybe the States, or maybe that other kind of like more straight, like hey, hi. You see it in the emails. If you receive an email from Latin America, it would be like, hello Riso, I hope you have the best day of your life. Paragraph. And then like when I get like from my colleagues from the US, it's like, hello, this is it, goodbye.
Drop
it. But
Yeah.
we are much more, like we're looking to build trust. And I think that is a quality here that is also very valued. And I think that's why it's going to take some time to build trust. You need to connect. You need to know each other. You need to know who you are. And so I think more and more, if we create that, the synergies between Latin America and Korea are going to grow and grow. And I think the starting point for an accelerator or VC would be specific verticals that would help them to start in something they know and open also the vision of who else is doing what and how they're doing and collaborate in that
True.
sense. I think there's a lot to learn one from the other, for sure.
I mean, I started to. The first time I met Maria was about 2 years ago, and I was very interested because like one of my Ukrainian friend told me
Yeah.
that. Oh, I have a friend from Chile. She's Uruguayan. So I was like, Latin American ecosystem. That's super interesting, right? And then by then you were interviewing Korean founders, Korean female
Yeah.
founders,
Yeah.
Korean ecosystem, Chinese ecosystem, Japanese ecosystem. You are the wandering VC of this world, right? And then about a year or two after, when I invited you to Korea, you were like saying, maybe I should, start learning Korean a bit, maybe stay in Korea a bit longer, and try to create more values, right?
Yeah.
What are the Latin American entrepreneurship or startup values that you aim to bring on board? Is it just simply bringing your portfolio companies to expand to South Korea, or is it like something beyond that you're thinking about? Like,
Yeah, I would love for Latin American founders to have Korea in the map. Like for me, because I've come here and I've learned so much and I see the opportunities that are here, that I go back and I am like a preacher, like, hey, have you looked about this or that? And I'm always connecting. Even last week, Next Rise, I was seeing like there was a whole system of like a vest. It was like kind of like a VR thing. And I have a startup that is actually working with VR for safety in like very high risk security industries. And I connected them. I was I was talking to them in the booth. I was like, I have a startup. I don't know if she understood anything I told her, but I was so excited when I saw it. I was like, well, yeah, this could be. And then I told, the founder, Felipe, I told him like, hey, I met these guys. I had the pamphlet and everything. So my vision, I really would love to connect and build this bridge. Like that's my vision. That if that happens, if that collaboration between those two that were not supposed to know each other, but then they collaborate and they're building an even better solution
magical
for someone, that is magical. Exactly. So and things. Yeah, I don't know. That would be awesome. Or even like a VC or an LP or something that would be interested in Latin America. I want to start learning. I want to know. And okay. Yeah, let's go. I can help you to find like where to start. Like
would there be any Latin American LPs that's interested in investing in South Korea? Just question out of blue.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know because I don't think so. Maybe
worth figuring it out, right?
We'll see because we don't have that much liquidity back home. So there's I think when people usually invest in what they know. That's like the number one thing, like invest in what you know. So I think it's a little bit for someone that would invest in Latin America. I think it would be someone that would be more riskier, and that would see the big potential that it has in like business wise, and maybe Latin American VCs or Latin American are still like trying to solve the issues over there. They don't have the extra money to see like opportunities beyond that, but who knows, like maybe there are some interesting ones, and if there are, I will bring them here.
Awesome. And now I have to jump into the closing question.
Okay.
Today morning, I saw this news about how President Lula was confronting Donald Trump and how these geopolitical situations are getting much more overheated amongst Latin America versus U.S. and this is eventually influencing a lot of startup ecosystem to change their direction, like even about the Delaware theory about SPVs. What are the comparative edge that's getting prepared in the Latin American ecosystem? What are the long-term vision that you see, like the ecosystems are trying to take? I think if that insight could be the closing remark, it will be awesome.
Yeah, well, The thing is, with everything that's happening right now, we have a head start with everything because our region is usually not a stable region. So we know how to navigate instability.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So and that is something that is a virtue that we have. And that is something that Latin American founders are so flexible. Like you cannot imagine, I speak with founders that they are on the verge of, the
shutting down. Yeah.
And they are
chill.
Wow. No, yeah. And they are, it's like, yeah, no, I'll go. And there's the resilience that people have. It's crazy. And it's so inspiring. I think that's why I work in this space. It's because I get inspired all the time with how these people confront, like big challenges with so many things that they have uncertainty. Absolutely uncertainty, and they're so secure about like moving forward. So I think what Latin American founders bring to the table is not only, they're very resilient, very creative, because when you live since you were born, when you live in instability, you create yourself as a creative person. You need to be solving things all the time.
Flexible.
So you are absolutely flexible. Sure. Also, I think the quality of Latin American founders are very. Also, I think they're very strategic in what they want. They also don't need a lot of money to do things that maybe other people would be like. They need to be very efficient because we don't have a lot of liquidity in our region. True. So they need to be very efficient because first they are very like looking into what they want to solve, and they want to solve it because it's a real problem. They are hurting about it. Their community is, so they're going to use their flexibility, their creativity, and they're also going to be, like using the right resources because it's scarce. So they're very effective and strategic. And they're very warm and nice people, and they don't have fear about like showing their fears, like they would collaborate. They talk, like founders talk to each other a lot and cheer up, and there's communities that are built out of like that vulnerability, and I think those are the best qualities. There are more, but those are kind of the best human qualities that bring the Latin American founders, besides, of course, of great talent in tech and business. So, well... Come to Latin America.
Come to Latin America.
Invest in Latin America.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in with us for our last 1 hour. I think the closing remark was very highly relatable with the topic that we're going to bring up next week. Next week, we're going to talk about founders and failures. It will be a very interesting edition. Yeah. So please stay tuned with us. Thank you so much. It was Monday Garrison. Thank you, Maria.
Oh, thank you, Rizzo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.